Welcome everyone to a new episode of Learning from Legends. And today we are going to look at a really cool game from the 6th world champion Botvinnik. I'm excited to show you this game. Last time we looked at a game by Steinitz, and he showed how to defend against the isolated queen pawn. And because he was so good at defending against the isolated queen pawn, it actually turned a lot of strong players away from taking on an isolated queen pawn. And I believe that game was in 1886, I want to say. This game is in the 1930s, so this is about a half a century later. And Botvinnik had a different opinion about the isolated queen pawn. And he was very good at playing with the isolated queen pawn and brought forward some new ideas and put it back on the map. So we're going to look at this game and kind of point out some of the ideas that he brought forward, and he used it to good effect against Vidmar in this game. So let's kind of click quickly through the opening and get to the point where the isolated queen pawn comes about. And so here we go. We have the isolated queen pawn. And now Vidmar, he, learned from Steinitz. He's heading for this blockading post. Going to use the tempo on that to help him get there quickly. And as we saw in the game with Steinitz on this isolated queen pawn, the idea is to blockade that square and then trade off a bunch of pieces and focus on the weakness of that isolated queen pawn once a bunch of pieces have been exchanged. But Botvinnik, of course, has different ideas. He's going to keep that bishop on the board. And here we see one of the moves that Botvinnik loved to play, moving his queen to d3. So why d3? Well, of course, it's an active square. It develops the queen. But beyond that, there's two main things that it does. One is it sets up this potential battery on the b1 to h7 diagonal, hitting that h7 square if white decides to move his bishop on that diagonal. And the other thing it does is it sets up this queen for a transport over to the king side to possibly be used in a king side attack. So white has this extra space, and Botvinnik says, okay, we want to use that extra space. That isolated queen pawn would be a weakness if all these pieces got traded off. But with that extra space comes extra mobility of our pieces. And so he decides he's going to use this d3 square for the queen because it can swing along that third rank. So Vidmar knows to go for the blockading square. And then now comes another thematic idea in these isolated queen pawn positions. Get that knight to e5. We'll see one thing that sets up for white here in just a minute. Bishop c6, rook a d1. So all of the pieces are kind of coming together on active squares for white here. And for black, you can say, well, he really hasn't wasted a whole bunch of time himself either, has he? It seems logical what he's doing, but he's quickly going to get in trouble here. So, knight to b4. So he's hitting the queen, and we'll see what idea Vidmar has in mind here. But Botvinnik says, okay, well, you gain the tempo on my queen, but that's fine because I want to move it over to the king side anyway. I want to get my pieces over to the king side in threatened attacks over there. Now, Vidmar, he says, okay, I'm playing my bishop to that blockading square. Now that I got this knight off of it with tempo, I'm going to try to exchange off. I want to force the exchange of that bishop because I'm x-raying through and hitting this, this a2 pawn. So I'm going to try to get a minor piece off the board. My position will be, less cramped. And the more pieces I can get off the board, the better. So Botvinnik, of course, he takes back with the knight and not with the bishop. He wants to keep that bishop on the board because it works very well with the queen. And it's also, we're going to see he has an idea coming up right now how to weaken this diagonal. And with that move, knight to e5, he cleared this file for the pawn, and he's going to use the f pawn as a battering ram. So what would that do? Well, we're going to see. He's going to soften up this diagonal. Now we humming along here. He's got this diagonal softened up. Black plays queen to d6 here. And now see if you can find Botvinnik's move. He has a crushing move in this position. Kind of use the ideas we talked about to see if you can find that. And that move is knight takes f7. Black is crushed here. Now in this position, white could just already take there, probably. Notice this alignment here. Discoveries on that rook on c8. He ends up playing bishop takes knight. Then he plays it. Now we still have this thing. Look at these pieces x-raying through. Very, very crushing. We'll just kind of click through the moves. Black resigned in this position. So, really interesting game. Kind of see Botvinnik putting forward ideas, really crushing people with the isolated queen pawn. We'll just click through very, very fast and point out a couple of the main ideas. Queen to d3, ideas of swinging it over, also ideas of getting the bishop to this b1 to h7 diagonal, creating that battery. You can imagine, a situation like this, if this knight comes off the board, that can get ugly real quick. Knight to e5, vacating that f file. Also beyond that, it's really penetrating in to black's position. Heavy piece swing, using that extra space to relocate heavy pieces over to the king side. f4, f5, battering ram, softening up this diagonal. And it's basically all over but the crying. So, awesome game by Botvinnik. Absolute legend. Really showed how these isolated queen pawns can be a dynamic weapon. And, I was really excited to find this game. I thought, wow, this is a cool game. And I'm looking forward to continuing a deep dive on these isolated queen pawn positions. We'll undoubtedly see some of these ideas used by other legends as we go through. But give credit where credit is due to Botvinnik by putting forward these ideas and making the isolated queen pawn positions, positions that can go either way. Based on all the factors of the position, put to rest the idea that they're just a static weakness because of Steinitz's efforts of defending against that IQP. So I hope you enjoyed that and learned something from it. We can learn a lot from these legends, and we will see you next time.